Hello, and welcome to Speed Politics 101, your go-to channel for unpacking the world of power, governance, and everything in between. I'm Billy Agwanda, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the fascinating ideas that shape our societies, past, present, and future. If you're curious about how politics influences our everyday lives, hit the subscribe and notification button so you never miss an update. Welcome to this quick dive into Plato's philosophy. Plato, one of the most influential philosophers of all time, believed in the world of forms, abstract, perfect ideals that exist beyond our physical reality. In his famous work, The Republic, he explores justice, the nature of the soul, and the concept of philosopher-kings. Plato argued that knowledge comes from understanding these eternal truths, not just through sensory experience. Join me on Speed Politics as we explore how Plato's ideas still shape the way we think about reality, knowledge, and society today. Plato is universally regarded as one of the most brilliant writers in the Western literary tradition and one of the most profound and influential thinkers in the history of philosophy. An Athenian of high social standing, Plato's works reflect his deep engagement with the political and intellectual currents of his time. However, the questions he explores are so timeless and his approaches so thought-provoking that he has shaped the thinking of educated readers across centuries. Philosophers in nearly every era have identified as Platonists in some form, drawn to his ideas and methods. While Plato was not the first to be called a philosopher, his deliberate exploration of what philosophy is and its proper scope fundamentally transformed the field. Philosophy, as it is often understood today, a disciplined, systematic inquiry into ethical, political, metaphysical, and epistemological questions, is largely indebted to his vision. In terms of depth and intellectual breadth, only a few thinkers, such as Aristotle, Aquinas, and Kant, are considered comparable in the Western philosophical tradition. Plato is known for his idea that the world we experience through our senses is imperfect and full of errors. Beyond this world, he believed, exists a more real and perfect realm made up of unchanging eternal entities called forms or ideas. These forms, like goodness, beauty, equality, and unity, act as ideal models that define the nature of the things we see in the sensory world. Unlike physical objects, these forms exist outside of space and time, making them fundamentally different and more perfect. Plato's philosophy emphasizes the difference between the many things we see that show qualities like beauty or goodness and the singular form that represents what beauty or goodness truly is. Physical objects get their traits and names from these ideal forms. This idea appears throughout his works, where he explores how understanding the perfect realm of forms can influence our values and actions, urging us to focus on the form's greater reality rather than the flawed material world. Plato also highlights the distinction between the soul and the body. He argues that the soul can exist independently of the body and is better able to understand the forms when free from physical distractions. In Meno, he suggests that the soul has knowledge of the forms from a time before birth and can recall them. In The Republic, he proposes that our current lives may be shaped as a reward or punishment for choices made in a previous existence. For Plato, true philosophers are those who understand the essence of the forms, like what goodness or courage truly is, beyond their appearances in the physical world. This understanding allows them to achieve a higher ethical standard. Plato believes that studying the form of the good is crucial for anyone seeking to fully comprehend and live a virtuous life. Plato's philosophy is fascinating, isn't it? But here's the thing. You'll rarely find him giving you a clear, cut-and-dried answer. Sure, he's known for key ideas like the forms, but even those come with a sense of uncertainty. Take the forms, for example. In Phaedo, Plato calls them hypotheses, basically saying, here's something to think about. And in The Republic, the form of the good? He doesn't pretend to fully understand it. Instead, he presents it as a mystery, something we're still trying to figure out. That's classic Plato. Raising big questions about things like how forms are known, what knowledge really is, or how we even use language, but not spoon-feeding us the answers. Now, compare that to someone like Aristotle, who is systematic. Aristotle gives you theories and frameworks, unlike Plato, who is more like a guide than a teacher. His works are dramatic, playful, and even a little theatrical at times. And instead of wrapping everything up in a neat package, Plato invites us to step in and wrestle with the questions. That's why he is such a great place to start if you're exploring philosophy, because he is not giving you a checklist of answers. Instead, he's showing you how to think deeply and critically. And you see this in so many of his dialogues, which are not works that say, "Here's the final word on philosophy." Rather, Plato's dialogues are more like open doors, encouraging you to step through and make sense of things for yourself. With Plato, you're not just reading, you're participating. Philosophy becomes a living, breathing process, and you are part of it, and that's the magic of Plato. He doesn't just teach philosophy, he makes you a philosopher. Plato never speaks directly to his audience or uses his own voice in his works. Instead, he conveys his ideas, questions, and arguments through the characters in his dialogues. This indirect approach allows Plato's thoughts to emerge from the interactions and discussions of his characters, rather than being explicitly stated by him as the author. Plato's way of sharing his ideas is really unique. He never directly tells us what he thinks. Instead, he uses characters and dialogues to explore questions and make arguments. This leaves us wondering, can we really know what Plato believed? Or are we just hearing the views of his characters? For example, in the Republic, Socrates says that justice in the soul is about harmony. But is that Plato's belief, or just Socrates' argument? Plato never directly says. Some think this was intentional, that Plato wanted us to figure out the ideas for ourselves, rather than focusing on what he believed. One way to approach this is to focus on what the characters say without worrying about Plato's personal beliefs. For instance, we can engage with Socrates' argument about justice without asking whether Plato himself agreed. That lets us dive into the ideas without getting stuck on guessing what Plato thought. But Plato didn't just write dialogues for fun. He used them to communicate something important to us. When a character presents an argument, it's up to us to decide if it's convincing or if it's exposing flaws in their thinking. Understanding the ideas of the characters is closely tied to understanding what Plato hoped we'd take away. Why did Plato choose this method? In many dialogues, like Phaedo, Symposium, or Republic, one character, often Socrates, leads the conversation and persuades others with arguments. Plato used this format to guide us toward big ideas, like the existence of forms or the nature of the soul. Even in laws, the main speaker talks about using explanations to educate citizens. Plato's dialogues seem designed to make us think and learn. Now, Plato didn't think we'd become wise just by reading his works. In Phaedrus, Socrates warns against relying too much on books, saying they're better for sparking ideas from past or future conversations. So, reading Plato isn't about getting final answers. It's about joining a conversation that challenges us to think deeply. That's what makes his work so timeless. It keeps inviting us to grow as thinkers, even thousands of years later. So where does Plato fit in our understanding of politics from his philosophy? Plato often expresses a longing to escape the messiness of human relationships and the imperfections of the physical world. In Phaedo, for example, he contrasts the flawed beauty of the sensible world with the perfect beauty of the forms. But here's what's remarkable. Despite this yearning to focus on higher theoretical truths, Plato doesn't turn his back on practical matters. While some works, like Parmenides, explore purely abstract topics, most of his writings address real-world concerns. Take Sophist, for instance. Even its complex discussion about being and not being is tied to defining sophistry and questioning whether figures like Socrates should be admired or avoided. In Timaeus, Plato describes the physical world as an imperfect attempt to reflect the perfection of the forms, shaped by divine forces using mathematics and harmony. But his commitment to improving human relationships is even more evident. In Apology, Socrates emphasizes his role in bettering society rather than isolating himself. In Gorgias, he claims to practice true politics by challenging the norms of Athens. In Republic, Plato critiques social institutions like family, property, and democracy, not to abandon political life, but to inspire meaningful change. And then there's Laws. Work packed with detailed proposals on governance, education, and legislation. These aren't the musings of someone detached from reality, rather they show Plato's deep desire to improve the imperfect world we live in. Now, here's an interesting question. Did Plato's views on politics evolve over time? In Republic, he's critical of democracy, promoting an anti-democratic regime as the ideal. But in Laws, he outlines a political system where non-philosophers, people unfamiliar with the forms, play significant roles in governance. This shift suggests he may have rethought his earlier dismissal of non-philosophers and started valuing efforts to reform imperfect cities. So what caused this change? Did he initially think such efforts were futile and later see their worth? To understand Plato's political philosophy, we need to analyze what his characters say in different works. For example, Republic and Laws have different main speakers, Socrates and the Athenian visitor, but that doesn't mean their ideas can't be compared. Both dialogues aim to persuade readers, so if they seem to contradict each other, we have to figure out why. Did Plato genuinely change his mind, or does the contradiction only appear that way? These are the kinds of questions we need to ask to truly engage with Plato's